fan, and this is a special presentation of our series, Lexington Remembers. Have the pleasure for this edition of talking with Jim Barry, who is the oldest member of our Lexington town meeting, and has a great story to tell, and is known for his strong views on a variety of subjects. So I've been looking forward to this interview. Jim, thank you for being willing to do this.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your life and your family and when you came here?
I came from Somerville. I was born there. In fact, my whole family. I come from a family of 6 children. I was number 3. My father was an electrician, a union electrician, and he made pretty good money. We lived in Somerville, and down near Lincoln Park, which is the field that spawned many, many great baseball players. Somerville was a great baseball city, always has been. We lived there, and I went to school there for 4 years at St. Joseph's School. I had the nuns. And let me tell you, the stormtroopers could learn a few lessons from them. But anyhow, it was a pleasant experience. I was kind of frail as a youngster. They tell the story I was not expected to live to my 2nd birthday. I had apparently every respiratory ailment that you can name, and I invented a few more. But I survived it. But the legend is that my father decided to move out of the city into the fresh air of the town, so he bought the house in Bow Street, 1931. We moved up here in July of 1931.
And how old were you then, Jim?
I was about 3 weeks short of my 10th birthday. I was 9. My 10th birthday was the following August 6th. And so I've been here ever since, at least legally here. As I mentioned before, I've been a Lexington resident now for, it'll be 78 years in July. But of course I was away during the war and on trips, and I was in a hospital for a long while with tuberculosis. But basically I was Lexington resident, and since then I've never seen any need to change. And luckily I was able to marry a girl from Lexington. She wasn't born here. She came here from Cambridge as a young child, about 7 years old. And we were both rare that we both went to the same church, got married to the same church, and we've been here ever since.
Sacred Heart was that? Or was that St. Bridget's?
Sacred Heart.
Yeah.
I'm a charter member of that. I was there when the parish opened. Officially, it was, we came here, the building was there. It was a mission of St. Bridget's. And they used to send a priest down on Sunday. They'd say 1 Mass. And as often as not, where we lived in Bow Street, it was just as easy for us to go down to St. James, down in Arlington Heights, which is now a Greek church, as you know. But then in November, it was either October or November, we got a pastor and a curate, Father Connor and Father Sullivan. The church became officially Sacred Heart Parish. So
And I'm
a plank holder there, a charter member of Sacred Heart.
Yeah, what year was that, Jim?
1931.
31?
Yeah, only a couple of months after we moved here.
I see, okay.
And they told me that they used to have services up in the old firehouse that since torn down, the old wooden one. The people, you know, my neighbors there told me about that. But every time they have a reunion, I'm one of those that's listed as being one of when it began. I started at the Adams School. Oh, well, by the way, we lived down on Bow Street, and my house had a very unique characteristic about it. It was at the corner of Bow Street and Cliff Avenue, and it was a side street alongside of it, Leighton Avenue. So I don't know if this is a record, but our house was on 3 streets. I don't know if that's
right in the corner.
Worthy of Ripley, but
Yeah.
there it was. And there was a brook, a beautiful setting right there, trees, a brook, at a little cottage there. There was a fellow from East Boston used to come there, Joe Ciccarelli. He'd come in on a Friday night from East Boston. He had it was a hut, a little shack or whatever you want to call it. And he'd stay there Friday night and Saturday night, and he had a garden. He planted things there. And he was great to the kids. He'd come over, call us over and give us little pieces of fruit or vegetable or whatever it was, and tell us funny stories in his accent. But there had been a mill there at one time, and there was the part of a mill race was still there. Unfortunately, when the new deal came in and they started the WPA project, they cut down all the trees. They got rid of his cottage. They did away with the remains of the mill race there, and they, I don't know, it was never the same after that. It was a beautiful little setting at the time, though.
WPA project to do what?
Well, there was a make-work project. They, I don't know what they intended to do. I thought it was a beautiful setting. I think most people would have agreed. But apparently they were thinking in terms of making a little park there.
Oh.
Actually, now, in late years, there is a very small park there. But if I had my way, I'd love to see it the way it was when we came there. And we were across the street from Cataldo's farm. You know, you have to understand, Lexington had numerous farms in those days, and even the 30s. In the early part of the 20th century, they say that Lexington had the most farms in Middlesex County. And even when we got here, they may not have had the greatest number in the county, but they had plenty of them. And we were right across the street from one of them, Jerry Cataldo's farm. It's actually a truck garden, is what they call it. And
well, it was always a farming community, particularly a dairy community originally, back in the 18th
yes, they had
century.
a Shanahan's down on Pleasant Street. And I'm trying to think, Cummings, I can associate them with Merritt Road. They even had a pig farm. They even had a pig farm, Miller's, over there by Five Corners there, you know, where that Merritt Road and School Street meet there. There's a building there, a business building there now, but Miller's Farm was there, and they raised pigs. I remember it. In my 10th grade biology class, the teacher, Miss Dias, wanted to have us examine tissue under the microscope. So she asked for she knew this kid was in the class there. I've forgotten his first name. He's one of the Millers. Could you bring us in a sample of, the pigs? They slaughtered them there too, by the way. He came in the next day and he had a paper bag and the whole lunge or something of a pig. All she wanted was a little thing. Well, anyhow, she took it, we scraped off. I had the job. I had to make the slide for the microscope when we examined the tissue out of the, that's funny because today they'd be horrified if everybody suggested having a pig farm in Lexington today. But we did have it at that time. This is in the 30s.
Well, I don't think that was the only one either, because Potter Pond, where I live, was
okay, I'll buy that.
Too.
I know about that one because the Miller was in my class, and there must have been. I was familiar with the farms in East Lexington. Cataldo's, Wilson's, Shanahan's, and the end of our street, Bow Street, ends on Rawson Road. That's where Rorio Pirro lives, by the way. Right. But beyond that, that was one huge, looked like the Wild West. I wouldn't call it a pasture. There was a field there, and kind of rocky, and it was also an automobile graveyard. For some reason, you could see the remains of 1920 vintage Model Ts and other cars there. But there was enough space there where we could play baseball. You didn't mind stumbling over a rock. And we had a great guy in our neighborhood, Benny Bettini. Pound for pound, he was probably the greatest athlete that ever lived in Lexington. But he was just too short. He played baseball, football, hockey, and he was a natural coach. He became the coach for the Boston Olympics. That was the amateur hockey team in Boston. He was also the trainer for the U.S. Olympic team that beat Czechoslovakia back in, I can't remember the exact date, back there in the 50s, I think it was. And they made a big story about it because they said they got the Russian team tipped off the American team to use oxygen, sniff oxygen while they were in their rest periods there. And they said that was the reason they were able to beat Czechoslovakia, for whatever that's worth. But
Sure
Benny
beats
was
what
that
they
he could
use
play
now.
any sport. And he used to teach us. And he'd bring the kids, the little urchins, up to Breed's Field, and he'd tell us how to play baseball. And I always remember one thing, every time I see a Major League game, I see the outfielders making a one-handed catch. Benny Bettino was absolutely dead against that. He says, don't do that. He says, Roger Hornsby would penalize you, send you back to the minors or something. He'd always quote these great managers of the past. And he always said, use both hands when you're catching a fly. He became, eventually, the director of recreation here in Lexington, until we went into the town manager form of government back in, was it 1970? We had Walter O'Connell.
Yeah,
And
right.
of course, the town manager brought in his own people, and poor Benny, he was out of a job on that. But he was a natural for that. He got tryouts. In the old days, you could, an aspiring athlete could go over to either Brace Field or Fenway Park, and they'd actually give you a tryout. And to see if you had anything, and if they were interested in you, they might sign you up and send you down to one of their minor league teams. Well, Benny Bettino would go over, but he was too short. And I always compare him to Phil Rizzuto, because that almost happened to Phil Rizzuto. Phil Rizzuto was an all-star player, as you know. And he was turned down initially by the Yankees, but some coach or something had a second thought, let's give him another try, and he became one of their greatest shortstops, Phil Rizzuto. He was a shortstop for my Navy baseball team out in the Philippines, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
he wasn't in our office.
You
He
never
was a
did-
chief. He was one of these chiefs that they use for phys ed,
Yeah.
that specialist.
Now, you never became a Major League Baseball player. What did you do? You went to Adams School, and then what?
Oh, I was never much of a baseball. Softball, yes, I did pitch softball. In later years, they found out I could throw a ball in their hands, so they made me the pitcher. I wasn't the greatest one in the world, by the way, but I was enthusiastic. At Adams School, and I say this now because my children scoff when I tell them, while other kids were out skating in the Arlington Reservoir, or the Lexington Reservoir, I was in the East Lexington Library reading books. And they don't believe it, but that actually was. I wasn't much for winter sports. I played around a few. Oh, I was a good swimmer though. I was always a good swimmer. They had an excellent program in the swimming pool, the center pool there, classes there. And not only did they provide the instruction, they even provided the transportation. We could meet. The kids from East Lexington could meet at the Adams School, and a school bus would take us up to the center. This is during the summer. Take us up to the center pool, the one that was before the one that's there now. And all of this at no expense to us. Those are the good old days.
Yeah,
that was the
that's right.
Depression. Those were the Depression years, and yet the town did that.
And so then from Adams School you went where?
Well, I was destined to go up to the junior high.
Yeah.
In August
is-
of 1933, they used to have routine x-rays in the schools, and they picked up TB on me. And so I went up and spent a couple of years up at the North Reading State Sanitarium.
No kidding.
And apparently was fully arrested after. They had no medication in those days. It was strictly fresh air and sunshine. And it worked in my particular case. And I
Now,
finally...
were you getting schooling?
Yes,
while
they
you
had a
were-
school up there.
Yeah.
And we had 8th grade graduation. I was the class president. There were only 8 people in the class. But at
Toughest
least
selection you ever
I
had.
was, I can honestly say I was class president for the 8th grade. Then I came back and I picked up the 9th grade at Lexington.
And which was physically where?
Oh, what we call the Muzzy now.
Yeah.
Yeah, the part facing the center, the center was the junior high, and the part east was the high school. We had the same auditorium, the same gymnasium, same cafeteria and all that.
And
You'd
the
be
school-
amazed at the number of people in Lexington today that seem they never heard this before, or they act as though they've never heard that before. But that, and not only we go there, Bedford and Burlington sent their kids there from 7th grade on.
And the
My
school
class-
department offices were in the building too, weren't
The what?
they?
Oh yeah,
The superintendent.
let me tell you, this was the size of the staff. Manfred Warner was the high school principal. And if you went into the high school side at the desk there, if you came in late, you had to go in and get the pass to go to your homeroom. And he had one secretary, I forgot her name. And on the other side of the office, there was a bench there, of course. That's where we had to go to do our business. There was another little office. That was the school superintendent, Tom Brindle, greatest man they ever lived in Lexington. And he had one secretary. That was the total administration of the town.
Well,
The superintendent and one secretary.
and as late as the, perhaps 57, 58, when I was on the school committee, the superintendent was down in the basement of Muzzy. We met down there.
My daughter, I have 3 children. My 2 oldest, Lois was the oldest. And
She's the one
they
who-
went to junior high at Muzzy. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Around 1952, don't hold me to that, the exact figure, plus or minus. They opened the new high school. And then what was the combined junior high and high school, they slapped the name Muzzy on it and became Muzzy Junior High School. But it served us, as I said, Bedford and Burlington. My class, 1931, was the last one to have Burlington. And our class was 199. And that record held up for almost 20 years. And of course we had lost Burlington. And then the war came and a lot of kids left, quit school to go into the service.
Mhm.
And they were pretty patriotic in those days. But then around 1960, I'm going to say 61, 62, they graduated a class of 198, one fewer than my class in 1939. The next year's class was something like 400 or 500. That's when the big boom came in there.
Do you know roughly what the population was in 10? And
When I came here, it was just
1930?
under 10,000.
Yeah, and it stayed pretty stable.
Yes,
so-
during the Depression, they did have a few building developments down in East Lexington. There was a huge pasture there. I loved it there. When I went away to the hospital in 1933, the pasture was there. When I got back in 1935, it was a housing development.
Where in East Lexington was
On
the
the
pasture?
on the right, just, you know where the shopping center is down by Bow Street,
Yeah,
the little strip mall there,
yeah.
and then on the other side, it was just across the street from that.
Uh-huh,
And
okay.
that was a huge, huge pasture. I've forgotten the name of it, but we used to play ball up there too. And
So then you graduated from the high school, and then what?
well, this was the Depression. Very few of us could afford college. We all took the college. My family, they had 3 courses up there: college preparatory, college prep, commercial, and I think practical arts, something like that. The girls, for the most part, took commercial because they were going to be typists or stenographers. A few of them did go to college, but in those days, the women were not really. They may have wanted to, but they didn't have the opportunities. But for the men, unless you got a scholarship, and your family had to be pretty well off for you to go to college. And ironically, as I've talked, Dan will probably know about this. There was one of my classmates did get a scholarship to Harvard, or partial anyhow, Norman Hayes. We used to call him Parson, very serious guy. He went there, and one of our class reunions, I said, what was the tuition at Harvard when you went there? He says, $400 a year.
Yeah, right, when I went.
$400 a year. Well, my class, in 1939, we had our 50th reunion. Thanks to a suggestion I made at our 45th reunion 5 years before, I said, why don't we take up a collection and have a scholarship for a member of the class of 1989, which would be our 50th anniversary. Incidentally, my daughter was in that. She graduated class of 89, but I specifically, so she's automatically out of consideration. It would be kind of tacky if she got it. So it took off, and we raised over $3,000. And they decided one scholarship of $1,500 for a boy and one for a girl. The only stipulation we had, they had to have had at least one parent who went to Lexington High School, or went to the Lexington schools. So when Norman Hayes told me this, I thought to myself, my God, $1,500, add 100 to that, and that would cover 4 years at Harvard.
Sure.
Fantastic.
Sure. Yeah. So then what happened after you graduated?
Well, it was a question of finding jobs. It was the Depression years. You got anything you could. I took any number of civil service jobs, and as a result of it, it took a couple of years. I finally wound up, I got a high mark in what they call scientific apprentice, and I wound up as a lab technician over in the Watertown Arsenal and ferrous metallurgy. And I was there when the war came about, and I left. Went into the Navy, I came back there. Then eventually I went over to the Navy Yard. And
You went to the Navy Yard in the late 40s.
actually, it was, I think, around 1950. I did a couple of different jobs during that period there. I was in and out. In fact, at one time, I was supposed to, I got signed up and accepted for a job up in Alaska, doing some sort of laboratory work. And
You never did go to Alaska, but you worked at the Navy Yard
Yes, I
until
did.
when?
1951. Yeah, 1951. I stayed there until the yard closed in 1974.
And you've got one of your children who is a trainer and married to one of the British regulars on April 19th, right?
Mike Riley. My daughter Lois and he were classmates, 1983. And he's a nice guy, very nice guy, very kind of quiet. Yeah, they were, oddly enough, they were together in the second grade, down at Bowman's, second and third grade. The Rileys lived, and then they moved over, I think, to Walnut Street. And
Walnut
from there
Street.
on, he went to another school.
Right. Now tell me, you talked about East Lexington, you talked about the farms.
Yeah.
You talked about the population of about 10,000 during the 30s and 40s, even into the early 50s. What did the center of town look like? How has it changed since your earliest memory?
The center really hasn't changed all that much. Basically, it's the same. If you go by, if you go up in the center there, the right-hand side of the street there, you see all these old pictures that are on the CVS there, pictures of Lexington in the center.
Yeah.
You see they've extended it. They have a lot of new buildings moving down towards east. Very little change, heading up towards the Minuteman statue. They changed some of the building, and of course those, the fire got rid of a couple of those big buildings on the right-hand side. We had a couple of really great fires there. But basically it's I think if a person were reincarnated from the 1950s, he wouldn't have too much trouble finding his way around Lexington Center. He would note that we had no buildings there, but it's laid out pretty much the same. We're fortunate in that sense. We have a small business district down in the Bow Street area, that strip mall. We have something down here on Merritt Road there, at the intersection of Merritt Road and Waltham Street, and of course up on Bedford Street there. But it's pretty well, Arlington, for instance, and by contrast, practically the entire length of Mass Avenue, Arlington, from the Lexington line down to Harvard, down to the Cambridge line, it's basically all commercial. There are houses mostly, but there must be hundreds and hundreds of storefronts in there.
You
We
know,
don't
it's-
have that here in Lexington, thank
It's
God.
a nice point because you look at Great Road in Bedford,
Yeah.
which used to be quite lovely.
Oh, yeah.
Lexington has always been much wiser than a lot of our neighboring communities in terms of zoning.
Yeah.
Now, tell me, what kind of a town was it? What adjectives would you use to describe
Hey,
it?
basically, you could describe it as the core population was primarily, I'd say, Yankee, or Sulu Yankee. By Sulu Yankee, I mean they had the same type of names. Now, a lot of people, Canadians, you had a tremendous population of Canadians.
Huh.
And I found this out in high school one time. The teacher, for some reason, asked us where our parents came from. How many of us had parents born elsewhere? I put up my hand. My mother was born in Ireland. My father was born here. And a huge number of kids put up their hands. Their people came from Canada. And a lot of them did not take on American citizenship until the war years when the defense industry came into it. And you had to be a citizen to work in most of the defense jobs. And then they scurried them to get their final papers and all. We had a lot of Italians, particularly down on my street. There was an Italian called the Little Italy there at the end of Bow Street, and it still has a high population of Italians there. The Cataldos, Boozers, and these are well-known people in town. Gario. Then over in Sylvia Street, we have, believe it or not, we had a vibrant Jewish community. They even had a synagogue there. And I remember in their high holy days, we used to see the people, they'd come from Arlington on around to go there. They were entirely at the synagogue, served people from several communities. And they eventually moved out of there and bought a house up across from the old high school. I'm going to say it was Dan O'Connell's house, but I'm not certain about that. They used that as a temporary synagogue for a while.
Yeah.
And then Dick Michelson's father was very involved, Harold Michelson. They formed the Temple of Muna. Temple Isaiah came along later. But I always remember that one down on Bow Street, in Sylvia Street there. We knew them all, actually, played around with them. But they had there was a very vibrant Jewish community in that area right there.
Well, now, how did the Catholics and the Jews and the Yankees and the Protestants and these different and the Italians and Irish?
We got along. I'm sure there were times that we'd hear a nasty remark one way or the other. We may have thrown a few ourselves. We received a few. But I would say Lexington was a wonderful town as far as that went. You know, there's an old saying. The old Yankees could be kind of forbidding. But you know, if you wanted something charity, they always say, go to the Yankees. I remember a woman, a friend of mine, came from Salem. She was Irish. And she told me that's what they set up in Salem. If you really needed something, if you were hurting and you needed charity or something like that, go to the Yankees. They were the best of all. The Yankees pretty much ran Lexington, but the year we moved up there, we had a selectman, Dan O'Connell. Dan O'Connell was one of the selectmen.
Which Yankees? What are some of the names of the people who are running the town?
Muzzy was a famous name here. I went to school with Ben Muzzy, a hell of a nice guy. Really nice guy, very tall. I don't know if you remember, it was back around 20 years ago, they made a big thing about the Minuteman, Clifford Muzzy. He was about 95. He was a descendant, his people, the old first Muzzy that came here as an indentured, captured soldier, a Scottish rebel. And his father was going to leave Lexington after having lived here for 95 years, and he was going to live with his son out in Ohio. That would be Ben, who was my classmate. Nice guy. George Wadsworth. Remember him on the school committee?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Check almost any name. I'm just kind of thinking right now, I'll think of these probably when this is over, the names will flood, but I remember the names that I wouldn't have associated with it. We had Monroe's. We had Dr. Monroe, famous Dr. Monroe. He lived in the Monroe Tavern for a while. He was the fellow that he performed some miraculous surgery on Ace Bailey, a hockey player back in the early 30s who had a fractured skull or something. He pioneered some sort of, took the skull fracture and opened up the brain or whatever he did there. It was something that was a first, and he's remembered for that. But the Monroe family was here. Then they had Adams. Well, of course, there were a lot of Adamses in town. My God, I went to school with Bill Adams, but I don't think he was a descendant. Oh, wait a minute. We have a neighbor down in Crescent Hill Avenue until about 15 years ago, and she was an Adams, and she was a descendant of actual John Adams.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was a descendant.
Now, by and large, the Yankees ran the town.
Yes, they did. They did a good job of it. Let me tell you, they really did a good job. They could be funny in some ways, to us anyhow, but I don't remember. I had an argument one time, a literary argument. Somebody posted something on the internet saying something about signs up in Lexington Lumber on Bedford Street that no Irish need apply or something like that. I answered them back, look, I've been here since 1931. I never saw a sign like that. Maybe back the years before. I heard people, the old timers did say they ran across a few nasty remarks here and there. But for the most part, I think Lexington was a model community in that respect. You know, we got along pretty much with one another. And
now, do you remember what the big issues in town were when you were growing up, 30s and 40s?
well, during the 30s, of course, we had the Depression. It was just a matter of survival. There were a few families in town, obviously, that had money, and it was a bedroom community for a lot of professionals, by the way. We had any number of doctors that worked over the Mass General. You know, the Baker Memorial Hospital, that was named for George Baker. He came from Lexington. I was a friend of his son. I remember being with him up at the Monroe Railroad Station. He was waiting, you know, he was going to meet his father coming home from the, you know, on the train. That was a big thing in those days. Most people working in Boston took the train. And I'd say for the most part, those people were pretty good. They, once in a while, but of course we had a few on my side that were not too good. And I'd say in my lifetime, Lexington has been pretty democratic in that sense.
Now I remember when I moved here in 49 and 50, big issues really were around the schools, and Ted Rouse was thinking the high school was too expensive and the schools were absorbing too much money, and the first version of the high school was turned down in a referendum. The Republicans ran the town, but they were split. There were the more conservative ones and more liberal ones. And then buying conservation land, that was controversial. Do you remember 30s and 40s, any of the big issues that people argued about and the town meeting argued about?
I do remember one. This is funny you should mention, because you just alluded to it. The 1939 town meeting. They were setting the budget for 1940. My history, well, I was a civics teacher at the time, Miss McIntyre. She was a wonderful teacher.
She was terrific.
Oh yeah. I had her for world history in my sophomore year. I had Miss Miller for my U.S. history my junior year, but I had Miss McIntyre again for the senior year. I think we called it American Problem, some name like that. And she suggested, she didn't mandate it, but she suggested we go up and sit in on a session of town meeting. You got to remember the 30s, the town meetings, they often, more often than not, they wrap it up in one night. That particular year, they had two nights. And get this, the proposed school budget for the entire school, now this is the high school, combined junior high, high school, 5 elementary schools, get this, for the entire year was $250,000. And I can't remember his name, he should live in infamy. He proposed an amendment, an article to cut it by 10%. So I'm sitting up on the balcony there, and I see all my men teachers mostly. The women teachers were not that concerned because they were not married. A woman could not be married and a teacher in Lexington in those days. But the men had families, and I saw my men teachers up there, very worried looks on their faces. The article came up for a vote. They had a standing vote. It was a tie vote, and so it didn't carry. They came that close to losing 10% of their salary back in the Depression. That's, you just a sigh of relief after that.
I hope that. Now, what do you think? You've had a long experience in town, and you've been active, and we won't spend much time on it because Jim and I did another tape on this topic.
Oh, yeah.
But when I moved here in 1949, although when you looked at the elections,
Yeah.
the town was about 2-1 Republican. You know,
Oh, yeah,
it
there
was
were a lot of
a good, solid Democratic vote. But boy, nobody would admit to being a Democrat. Nobody voted in primaries. And the Democratic Town Committee didn't amount to anything. And then you and Edie Sayre and Woody
Oh, yeah.
Sayre and
Woody needed there.
Marion
There
Colletta
was
and
a-
Joe and
There was
group
one
of
of
us.
the greatest characters of all time.
Oh, I guess. And the problem was to make being a Democrat in this town respectable.
Yeah.
And you and I worked on that. We've got a whole tape that we did elsewhere on that.
We had a vibrant organization when I think of it. It was really made waves.
It did indeed. It did indeed.
Dan was the big, I don't know, the redeemer of the Democrats in Lexington. We always had Democrats here. Charlie Daly, Mr. Daly lived next door to us. He was a very active Democrat. And as Dan says, if you looked at the list of registered voters, you would swear that only about 10% of the town registered as Democrats. But if the vote would come out, they would get a third of the votes. It was never official, but it was always considered wise. If you applied for a job in the town, it would be very judicious to have an R beside your name on the voting list. But then when the votes come in, even in 1928, I was amazed. I wasn't here then. I was in Somerville. I remember that election clearly. But in Lexington, I looked up
Al Smith and Herbert
Al
Hoover.
Smith and Hoover. And Al Smith got a good vote here in
Did
Lexington.
he?
Absolutely. Oh, nowhere near a majority, but
Yeah,
far beyond what you would have expected if you went by the registration.
that's interesting.
I saw Hoover in 1928, by the way. I was in Somerville then, and he came through in a motorcade, and one of those open touring cars with this tall silk hat, bowing to the people, and the local delinquent we had in Somerville at that time threw an apple or something and knocked it out of his hand. But everybody was holding up Al Smith posters. Somerville was Democratic. That was a solid Democrat city. It was kind of a shock to us when we moved to Lexington to find out that Democrats didn't really parade up and down the street every
No,
day.
they sure didn't. They sure
Until
didn't.
Dan came. Then
Now,
it changed things.
what do you think about, in comparison to when you first moved here and just in general as an active, when
Well,
did you
was
get
I-
elected to town meeting?
Yeah,
When were you first elected?
1975.
Okay, so you've been involved in these things for a long time.
Yeah.
What do you think about the town now? You said it was cohesive, a farming community and so on. What does it look like to you as
Pretty much of an intellectual community right now, if you think of it there. I forget what they say, the number of people here with advanced degrees and all. This was not a hick town by any stretch of the imagination. Before that, we had a large agricultural community, granted, but it was a middle class, and we had a fairly solid high class unit here in Lexington there. These were people, the descendants of the old Yankees. And they had a few dollars. Yankees, of course, you were not supposed to flaunt money. You're supposed to be frugal and all that. But as I said, we had a lot of doctors and lawyers that lived in the town. And the other great, I'd say great middle class. But of course, when you think of the 30s, the thing that stands out is the Depression. And this is what we might be facing right now. Thank God we have the Federal Reserve, the bank thing that guaranteed, FDIC, that's it, the FDIC. The banks were folding right and left. I lost $12 in a savings account I had down the Inman Trust Company in Cambridge.
Just
I
as
was wiped out. $5, no, $12. I'd gotten in birthday gifts and so forth. That was around 1930,
Yeah.
before we came here.
Yeah.
And the Lexington banks apparently survived. There were 3 banks when we came here: the Lexington Trust, the Lexington Savings Bank, and the Lexington Cooperative. And they've all changed names by now, but of course we've had any number of others that came in. But I don't remember any houses, any banks in Lexington collapsing during the Depression.
Boys.
I'll say one thing about getting back to the Yankees now. Here's something. About twice a year, the Lexington Minuteman would have 2 full pages of announcements of tax titles. People who were delinquent in paying their real estate taxes. And theoretically, the town could then take over the land. There was in fact, we were even on it, I think, at one time. My father was between jobs. Yeah, because the union electricians were doing so well, he finally got into civil service, and that saved us. But I remember seeing those 2 full pages of tax titles. It's rare, you may see 1 or 2 a year now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll see bank foreclosures more often. But they have this, and then I'd never known, I won't say it never happened, I don't know, I don't remember any house that the town actually took over, a tax title. They forgave a lot, and they let people pay up eventually. So the old Yankees were pretty good when you come right down to it.
When you, what should please us as Lexingtonians about today, in today's Lexington, as opposed to the 30s and 40s, and what should we?
Well,
What should
people
be
today, we
concerned
have a new
about?
type, we have a very diverse community in here. For the most part, they're very easy to get along with. I don't agree with a lot of their philosophies, but I'm sure they don't agree with mine. Keep in mind, and I'm noted for this because I'm the one that's complaining mostly about the development. It's nostalgia. I remember the Lexington of old, what a beautiful town it was. The wide open spaces, and I've seen the development, well, what used to be Cataldo's Farm. It's now all houses, all built, they're all very expensive houses.
Yeah.
And I've seen so much of that happen there, that every time, they pretty much have confined it to, certain core areas like Hartwell Avenue and Hayden Avenue and places like that. But I keep thinking of Burlington. If you go up Burlington 3A and you see the mess in the buildings, if you fly over Burlington, you think you're flying over Chicago with all those. I remember that was all one big pasture, Burlington. They had more cows than people there. Honest to God. I remember they came to our school. And that's the thing I'm afraid that would happen to Lexington if they don't, if it isn't kept in check. Basically, the thing I miss most is the open. As a matter of fact, when they started the development, I went along with it. I thought it was probably good at the time. I didn't realize it was going to get so extensive. But then when I see other towns, I say, my God, we're in wild open spaces right now compared to something like Burlington.
Yeah.
God, I hate to see the town. Bedford is held up pretty well, though.
Yeah. Tell me, I don't, is there anything else that we haven't touched on in the few minutes that we have left here?
Can I see a peek at my print notes here?
Sure.
Right. I'm sure there must have been something I had in mind. No, I think we've got them all. Yeah. No, we pretty well covered it. I've seen a great change in the population here. What was once basically Yankee or Yankee Canadian, Irish, Italian, maybe an occasional French, Canadian, or something like that. But it was basically what we call European.
Yeah.
European
Yeah. Okay.
descent. And surprisingly, to a lot of people, a fair number of Jewish people.
Yeah.
They were mostly concentrated down in East Lexington, but
Yeah.
they had like the Michelsons and Julius Seltzer had good business here. Oh, by the way, Michelson, you know, there were 2 stores in Lexington Center that were here when I was as a kid. Michelson's and the Theater Pharmacy. There's the only 2 remaining stores from the 1930s here. You were talking about after school, and I should have mentioned this. The war came, and the GI Bill was a godsend,
Yeah.
not only to the veterans, but to the country. That was one of the most successful things than ever. But my cousins and brothers and so forth all took advantage of it. I did myself, but I couldn't be bothered with the conventional college program, math and this and that. Who needs it? I'm not going to be an engineer. Languages I loved. Oh God, I studied languages. I went to Berlitz and the Harvard Extension, and I studied 4 languages. English, I love English. We had a great English teacher at Lexington High School, Miss Forsyth. They said, I've heard it said that, I don't know, I never saw it in print, but it was rumored that if you passed your senior English class, Harvard would accept it for freshman English.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, that was the story going around at the time. I had her for 1 year, and she was
Listen,
tremendous.
thank you very much.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
This has been fascinating.